Today on a Hamster and Gretel episode of the Danville Discussion.
Hey, new girl, we need to chat.
Excuse me?
We know what you're doing. You're watching Yuko Cheerleading Warrior Attack 7. We noticed your button.
Hold up. You guys watch anime?
Well, we watch Yuko Cheerleading Warrior. It's only like the best show ever.
What are you two doing here?
Kevin wanted us to help you investigate.
Where's Kevin?
He wanted to get to the pep rally early to try to sit near Hiromi.
Oh, bless his heart. Did you find anything?
No, did you?
Nothing. I've talked with all of them and learned some horrifying things about this school. Don't eat the fish sticks.
Rudolph!
I keep forgetting that he can talk.
And welcome to the first 2023 edition of the Danville Discussion, a podcast about all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. My name is Caleb Dirksen, and some of you may know me from my YouTube channel of the same name, home of some web series related to animation such as Caleb Reviews. If this is your first time listening to the Danville Discussion, well, let me tell you, the title explains everything for you. In this podcast, I watch each episode of either Phineas and Ferb or Hamster and Gretel, and I search for all the cultural and in-universe references, plus some of my favorite moments, some fun facts, etc., etc. And then finally, I will end things off by giving the episode a roller coaster rating. So, for today's episode, we're going to start off the new year by going into episode 4 of Hamster and Gretel, which includes the following segments: Cheer Cheer Bang Bang and La Ballad of La Cebolla. If you guys want to check out more episodes of the Danville Discussion, then head on over to anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen and it'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion website on Anchor. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions you may have about this episode by emailing us at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with the series and episode title in the subject line. Wow, finally! It's been a month since I last did an actual episode for the Danville Discussion. The last episode I did was for episode 6 of Phineas and Ferb, if you remember. I was originally planning to release this episode 2 weeks after that, like I usually do, right before Christmas, but I unfortunately had a headache, which resulted in a cold which prevented me from getting any creator work done for the rest of the week. I had to get my meds to make it go away quicker. But now that I'm all better, I'm able to start the new year off by doing what I should have done before I got sick. And another update that I want to share with you is that we actually have some news to cover. Vincent Martella, the voice of Phineas Flynn, and David Arrigo Jr., the current voice of Ferb Fletcher, will be attending Central Florida Comic-Con next week between January 21st and January 22nd at the RP Funding Center in Lakeland, Florida. So if you're a Phineas and Ferb fan and you live somewhere near Lakeland, it'll give you the perfect opportunity to see these two talking about their love for the show, how they got to voice these characters, everything like that. Last thing to mention before we get into today's episode is that I did make a mistake in my Phineas and Ferb episode 5 discussion when I was talking about Raging Bully, and I was talking about Holly's voice actresses as that was her first major speaking role in the show. I mentioned that she was voiced by Symphonique Miller and later Diamond White, and when I mentioned Diamond White, I brought up that she would be set to voice Moon Girl in Marvel's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, the upcoming animated series on Disney Channel, and Moon Girl's real identity I thought was named Luna Lafayette. But it turns out it's actually Lunella Lafayette. I must have read her name incorrectly, so sorry about that. But anyway, let's start things off with this, and let's find out when these segments, or better yet, this whole episode first premiered. This half hour was first released on Disney Plus in the US on Wednesday, August 17th, 2022, along with episodes 3 and 5, and then it officially premiered on television on Saturday, August 27th that year on Disney Channel. Okay, so for our first segment, we're gonna start with Cheer Cheer Bang Bang. And Cheer Cheer Bang Bang was written by Amanda Domenech. It was storyboarded by Alan Delmar Oka and Heather Gregerson, and it was directed by Amber Tornquist Hollinger. What happens in this episode is that there's a series of bank robberies led by cheerleaders with hoodies and masks over their faces, which hides their true identities, accompanied by the opening song We Take What We Want. It's pretty short, but it still kinda rocks.
I think we're gonna get into some sticky situations. 'Cause we're moving on, we're all out of patience.
And this cheerleader heist leaves Kevin and Fred baffled, and at this moment, Fred makes a callback to the last episode of the show that I watched. She mentions that they just fought a sentient mustache, which was Van Dyke, the villain who appeared in Close Shave. Kevin sees blue and gold on their cheerleader clothes, assuming it sounds familiar because it turns out that those cheerleaders that are pulling off these bank robberies are actually from Kevin and Fred's high school. On the other side of the room, Hamster and Gretel are playing video games, and Hamster is surely beating Gretel, even though he claims he doesn't have opposable thumbs. Hamster is still a funny character in my book.
How are you beating me?
And I don't even have opposable thumbs.
When Kevin gets the yearbook and shows Fred a photo of the cheer squad, I love Fred's reaction where she's like, "Ah, they're so sweet." They're guilty.
It's our school colors, right? Here.
Aw, they look so sweet. They're guilty.
Kevin declares that they need more evidence, which ignites an investigation. Gretel and Kevin decide that Fred will go undercover as a cheerleader to find out what all of this means, and Fred responds, "And why exactly are you looking at me?"
Maybe, but we need some more evidence.
We need to investigate.
We need someone on the inside.
We need someone to go undercover.
They're having cheerleading tryouts tomorrow.
And why exactly are you looking at me?
So they go outside for cheerleading practice. However, Fred lacks the peppiness to go through with the plan, due to a flashback from 3 years ago when she forgot to smile in a gymnastics tournament, because she has this monotone personality inside of her, kinda like Tina Belcher from Bob's Burgers, and that forced her to quit gymnastics, which is an interesting fun fact reveal. And so Hamster and Gretel attempt to train her, and Kevin goes out to look for a cheerleader outfit that matches the school's, and even spells out Fred's name like a cheerleader, but Fred interrupts, asking him not to spell out her name, and then Kevin whispers, "Go Fred," and wishes them good luck. This is another hilarious moment right there.
I'm the pep coach, and Hamster's my assistant coach. We'll have you smiling in no time.
I'm gonna go and buy you an outfit for your tryout. F-R-E!
Do not spell out my name.
Go, Fred. Good luck.
Then Gretel goes through many attempts to get Fred to smile, and Fred is looking in a mirror, and she tries to smile, but that cuts short after only a few seconds. So Gretel gets some tape and wraps it around Fred's head to make her smile, but then it breaks free and Fred still has that monotone frown. So what happens next is that Gretel tries to make Fred laugh by throwing a pie in Hamster's face, and Hamster can't see where he's going. But that doesn't work either, and I just flat out love Fred's sarcastic response right here.
That is very funny.
Then why aren't you smiling?
So next, Gretel pulls out a feather and tries tickling her with help from Hamster, but that fails as well. Then it uses the Batman-style hero transition to Kevin, who is at a clothing store when he ends up meeting Hiromi while looking in the mirror to determine the sizes. Kevin sheepishly says to her that Fred is trying out for cheerleading, and as he blushes, Hiromi looks in the mirror with the outfit and says that the size looks right, but the style doesn't feel much like Fred, and Kevin gives her the reason, which is that Fred has to go undercover, and he pretty much makes up a lie that Fred is doing a story for the school paper, to which Hiromi responds that she's the editor, and Kevin replies that it's deep undercover and that Hiromi shouldn't tell anyone, especially Fred. Back at Fred's house, when nothing works out, Gretel notices that Fred watches the anime Yuko Cheerleading Warrior Attack 7, which even comes with its own anime theme song.
If you achieve that doing, maintain unease. Our four forms of power will bring you to your knees. Sing name! 领袖可能 Brenda 給你領袖咁能 happy 領袖可能 Brenda 給你領袖咁能 happy
and suggests that she pretend to be peppy by learning all the moves that the cheerleaders in the anime perform to fight the villains, since they're super spy warriors in disguise as cheerleaders, and Gretel high-fives Fred, but ends up going too hard with it, which is called a super slap, and that's part of Gretel's attack gag, where the words appear on screen in the same style as her punches. I just love how creative this gag can be, since it's supposed to pay homage to the comic book style, plus Gretel's reaction to those words appearing was just a funny fourth wall break to me.
Satirical mockery I can do.
Ow! Sorry, I gave you a little super slap there. I have no idea where these come from.
Also, there's one cultural reference here, which is that Keep Left card on Fred's bulletin board, and that's the name of the band that Dan Povenmire was a part of. So then Hamster, Gretel, Kevin, and Fred are at the high school, and Coach Haggerty does a last call for cheerleading tryouts. At that point, the lights in the gym turn off, and a spotlight shines down onto Fred, who is already in her outfit, and she's also now in a wig of long, thick, wavy hair. Fred does all the moves she learned from the anime, and while she's in the air, Kevin is reading a physics book, and who appears to be Albert Einstein comes in with a whiteboard of astrophysics, displaying a drawing of Saturn and an air rotation symbol, which Einstein directs at Fred, all while Gretel is looking up in the air with her binoculars, which makes me wonder, how can the real Albert Einstein still be alive in this show when he died a long time ago, back in the 50s? I mean, he's a big legend, so I guess because of that, he can appear wherever and whenever he wants in animation, just like Elvis Presley, who's even gonna have his own animated series on Netflix from Sony Pictures Animation called Agent Elvis, which was originally called Agent King, hence why he's known as the King of Rock and Roll. After Fred lands on the floor, she finally smiles and she wins the admiration of everyone, allowing her to make the team. And Coach Haggerty asks if Fred can learn a super complicated routine for the pep rally tomorrow afternoon, to which she replies, "Learn a super complicated routine for the pep rally tomorrow afternoon is my middle name."
You'll be perfect! You think you can learn a super complicated routine for the pep rally by tomorrow afternoon?
Learn a super complicated routine for the pep rally tomorrow afternoon is my middle name.
Then the cheerleaders are exercising as Coach Haggerty tells them that they have 10 minutes to get 110% ready for the pep rally, which is 11% per minute. And then Fred talks to one of the cheerleaders, the one who's listed in the credits as Naya, voiced by Abby Espiritu. I don't know how to pronounce that last name, but oh well. Asking if they're into crime, such as theft, and then Naya whispers to the red-headed cheerleader as if something suspicious is happening, and then they're lifting all the other cheerleaders on top to do a pyramid, and Fred talks to the redhead, asking if they find embezzlement morally questionable, which causes her to whisper to the black cheerleader about it, as the blonde cheerleader falls yet is still okay. And when the pyramid is finally formed, Fred asks if the other cheerleaders know where she can get her uniform and her money laundered, leaving the black one and the redhead whispering to each other. At the corner of the gym, Fred is texting Kevin, saying that there hasn't been any evidence of the crime so far, as 3 of the cheerleaders interrupt her and suspect something about her, but to her nerve, it turns out they discovered that Fred has been watching Yuko cheerleading Warrior Attack 7 since she's been wearing that button. That suspect moment caught me off guard, since I thought they were gonna suspect that Fred was spying on them, but that wasn't the case. But Fred wonders if they watch anime, but they do mainly watch Yuko, that exact anime, saying it's the best show ever. But then Gretel texts Fred, calling her into the locker room, where they attempt to search through the lockers. Gretel tells Fred that Kevin wanted to get to the pep rally early to try to sit near Hiromi, with a romantic expression as she says that name, and Fred responds sarcastically, bless his heart, that was kinda cute right there. Fred then asks if Gretel found anything, which she didn't, and says that she talked with all of the cheerleaders and learned some horrifying things about the school, as Hamster throws a grand piano out of a locker, and then Fred says, "Don't eat the fish sticks," with Hamster replying, "Brutal," Fred forgetting that Hamster can talk. Fred doesn't believe that it's the cheerleaders responsible for the robbery, since they're not supervillain evil, but just teenage girl evil. But suddenly they then see Coach Haggerty and the other cheerleaders entering the locker room, and the coach encourages them to kick high, smile big, and steal all the money in the city, and that reveals Coach Haggerty to be the culprit because she has a hypnotic whistle, but she forgot to switch it to hypnotize mode, and Hamster, Gretel, and Fred witness the coach hypnotizing the cheerleaders. The coach then states that she plans to hypnotize the whole school to pull off the biggest multi-bank robbery in the world, hitting every bank in town at the same time, but she forgot about Fred because the latter hid in a room with Hamster and Gretel to avoid being hypnotized, and Haggerty and the cheerleaders walk away. So then Fred devises a game plan inside the room, and she pulls out a set of noise-canceling headphones. When the cheerleaders enter the gym, we discover that the P on the uniform stands for plumbers, the name of the high school team, and then Coach Haggerty blows the whistle, hypnotizing everyone in the gym, and one of the people in the bleachers really reminds me of Stacy Hirano from Phineas and Ferb with her body design. It then zooms out to a computer that Hamster, Gretel, and Fred are using, and Gretel fears that they're too late and sees that Kevin and Hiromi are out there too, getting hypnotized, and Fred says that they need to find a way to break the hypnosis. But then Fred figures it out that the coach patented the whistle under her name, including a detailed user's manual which reads, and I quote, "Warning. Whistle will not work when the hypnotized person hears loud, jarring, rhythmical sound or music." And so Fred and Gretel discover that a cheer-like rhythm will counteract the effects of the whistle, and when it goes to the Batman-style hero transition, Fred's head zooms in and out, cutting to the gym, where Coach Haggerty commands the hypnotized school members to go rob, steal, and pilfer cash, gold, and jewels, but mostly cash. And this even results in the school's marching band to leave behind their instruments too, and this prompts Fred to reluctantly perform a catchy dance number with said instruments called Don't Steal from the Banks, with Hamster holding the bass drum and Gretel playing the snare drum, and the song frees everyone from their mind control.
Don't steal from the banks, said don't steal from the banks. You'll go to jail, you'll get no thanks. Don't steal from the banks.
While this is happening, Coach Haggerty tries some ways to stop Fred, but fails and throws a pom-pom smoke grenade on the floor before escaping the gym. The song itself is pretty catchy, like I said, and I like the end part when Fred says that the evil coach is getting away as the last lyric.
Ho ho, hey hey, the evil coach is getting away. Wait, no, that's for real. She's literally getting away.
Get her, Fred!
Hamster and Gretel lift Fred up into the air, where she does her Yuko cheerleading Warrior Attack 7 moves, and while it happens, it cuts to this gag where Hamster and Gretel are watching her and waiting for her to land, and Gretel looks at her watch and spins a pencil in a bored manner, and then the two are playing cards with each other, until finally Fred lands in front of the coach, who then pulls out a blaster and says, "Don't be a hero, kid," and then Fred replies, "I'm not a hero, I'm a cheerleader."
Don't be a hero, kid.
I'm no hero. I'm a cheerleader.
And then she karate kicks the coach backwards, and then Hamster and Gretel are playing Haggerty like a basketball, catching her in the net, which leaves her shouting, "I hate cheerleaders!" They finally defeat the coach, as Fred shows a real smile for a second, and then it goes away after 5 seconds.
Yeah! Look! A real smile! I knew it was in there somewhere!
And it's gone.
And then she removes her cheerleader disguise, where the skin turns out to be camouflage clothing, and she also takes off the wig and puts her glasses back on. Then Naya comes to Fred and, with a shocked expression, finds out that the coach was hypnotizing them to rob banks, that Fred was spying on them to find this out, and that she apparently had pants that looked like bare legs under her cheerleader outfit but over her regular clothes. But despite her suspicions, she thanks Fred for saving everyone, and invites her to be on the cheer squad for real if she wants. Fred says that the cheerleaders are cooler than she initially thought, especially as she learned earlier that they watch Yuko cheerleading Warrior Attack 7 as well, but she doesn't feel like she's cheerleader material, though she offers them to give her a call if they ever want to watch anime together. They then high-five each other and then Naya leaves. And then Kevin and Hiromi come in to congratulate Fred, and Hiromi says to her that they'll be bumping the fish sticks expose and making this the front page, asking for 2,000 words by tomorrow morning, which leaves Fred suspecting something about Kevin, who nervously responds that he was with Hiromi, and that he had to go through several cheerleading outfits, and that now Fred is on the school paper, and then he runs off. And then the episode ends with Fred declaring somebody's looking for a super slap, and the camera zooms out, revealing the same super slap words of the Gretel attack gag from earlier, and then Gretel breaks the fourth wall again, saying she made a mistake leaving the words there, and she grabs those words and flies off to get rid of them. And that wraps up this segment. This running gag is possibly my favorite in this episode.
What did you do?
I was with Hiromi and there's so many cheerleading outfits, and anyway, now you're on the school paper. Okay, bye!
Somebody's looking for a super slap.
Oops, sorry. I left these here earlier.
The only other cultural reference I found is the title, which is a parody of the 1968 film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I actually do remember watching that movie, but the only time I really remember watching it as a kid was through a VHS copy that my uncle and aunt had, and now I own said VHS since I found it at a thrift store a year back, so I might watch it again sometime. For the animation of this episode, for some scenes, I can't tell if the animation was done by either Snipple or Synergy, but I think it was mostly done by Snipple like the other episodes I've seen for this podcast that were directed by Amber Tornquist-Hollinger, and here it isn't perfect since some parts can get inconsistent, but it is still decent. I cannot deny that the action scenes in this segment are very clever, including the robberies and Fred's cheerleading moves, and I also like the hair animation when the cheerleaders are falling or leaping. Plus the effects, the backgrounds, and the lighting on the characters are kinda nice as well. And for the scene with the opening of the Yuko Cheerleading Warrior Attack 7 anime, it looks very colorful, and the anime style on the characters in that show does look kinda decent. Not completely accurate to actual magical girl anime like Sailor Moon or the Pretty Cure franchise, but it is still fine as is. And that Godzilla-like monster that they're fighting does almost feel like he would work in an anime that does feature monsters like the Pokemon anime. I do feel like he would be a legitimate Pokemon, just shrink it down to the size of Charizard or one of the ultimate Pokemon that you would see on the cover art of the mainline games so that he can fit inside a Pokeball. During the flashback, I noticed some clones of the background characters in the bleachers if you look closely, as Fred is doing her gymnastics, though the rest of the character animation, while good, is somewhat inconsistent. Sometimes the line art can get sorta thick, which makes it even more obvious that Snipple was part of this, along with some tweens on the characters here and there, but sometimes the characters' movements can be Phineas or Milo normal, though most of the lips can look rather blocky like on Fred, Hiromi, the cheerleaders, and more. But the episode itself is very good, and with all its good aspects, I'd watch this again. Now the next one is gonna be La Ballad of La Cebolla, and La Ballad of La Cebolla was written by Alex Estrada, storyboarded by Rufino Roy Camacho II, and directed by Trisha Garcia. In this one, Kevin and Gretel are at the grocery store purchasing ingredients for a special remedy soup for Dave, their dad. As they're going through the produce aisle, Gretel is looking for avocados, 2 of which are not ripe, and one ends up being too ripe to the point where Hamster takes a nacho chip out and dips it in the overly ripe avocado and then eats it. Gretel then passes some ingredients that are on Kevin's checklist, some of which are literal, like a moody lime and a hot pepper with an attitude. And next, Kevin mentions Vapor Rub, which is an actual medical product of Vicks known for NyQuil, so this may be some sort of product placement right here.
All this trouble for some folk treatment remedy soup when we could just buy that Vapor Rub and call it a day.
And the last item on the list is One Perfect Onion, and they see a stack of onions, but just as Gretel is about to grab the onion, someone else takes it, and as it turns out, Kevin and Gretel encounter La Cebolla, a supervillain with the power to communicate with onions, hence that La Cebolla is Spanish for the onion. Her backstory is explained in her own song, where she was once a star in a telenovela called Fresas de Amor, which can be translated in English as Strawberries of Love. But after catching salmonella and the fact that she was unable to cry anymore, she was written out of the show, and she tried different remedies to get her back on the show, but it all failed until the night that she got her onion whispering superpowers from the aliens. I'd say it's a nice backstory song that she has, though it is obvious that now we can assume that in this show, the aliens can give anyone superpowers, whether good or evil. The song is also on the soundtrack album too. At first, Kevin and Gretel don't take her seriously just because she can talk to onions, and they're playing with different produce, pretending that they can talk to it just to mock La Cebolla.
You talk to onions!
Is that even a power? I mean, I can talk to onions. Hey, Mr. Onion, read any good books lately? Oh, you haven't, because you're an onion.
Hey, Kevin, look. Blah, blah, blah. I'm chatting with a banana.
I'm lounging with a leek. How you doing?
But she demonstrates her actual ability, and the onions fall off the stack and pick her up, bringing her out of the supermarket. But one moment before she exits, a customer interrupts her asking for a kiwi, and she brings one to her.
Excuse me. Could you pass me a kiwi?
Here you go, ma'am.
Gretel is curious if she and Kevin should go after La Cebolla, and is worried that now they don't have a perfect onion for the remedy, though Kevin is unsure if onion whispering is a crime, and instead, he decides to pick up an adequate shallot. Back at the Grant Gomez house, Dave blows his nose, and the red on the nose is indicating that he's sick, and Carolina says that she warned him not to go jogging in the rain, and funny enough, he responds that he loves running in the rain because it makes him feel dramatic.
Ay, mi corazón. I told you not to go jogging in the rain.
But I like running in the rain. It makes me feel dramatic.
And so Gretel is watching the news where Veronica Hill reports that stores and restaurants across town have reported that their onions have vanished, which could only be the work of La Cebolla as she continually wreaks havoc everywhere across the city. Maurice, the chef working at a French restaurant, says that without onions, his French onion soup is just onion soup, and he doesn't know who he is anymore.
This is Veronica Hill reporting on a strange phenomenon that has authorities confounded. Stores and restaurants have reported the mass disappearance of onions from their shelves and storerooms.
Without onions, my French onion soup is just French soup. I don't know who I am anymore.
And at that, Kevin is thinking that maybe they should have gone after La Cebolla, but Gretel doesn't really care since the woman talks to onions, plus, as Carolina calls them for dinner, Veronica says that she agrees with those watching who say, "Why should I care?" At the table, Gretel asks Kevin to pass the salt, but they accidentally knock it over, and Carolina says that it's bad luck to spill salt at the table, and that Kevin has to throw it over his left shoulder, to which Kevin responds that it's just a silly superstition. Then Gretel tries to get the salt herself, and she accidentally knocks it over too, which starts the bad luck. And then Carolina has Kevin and Gretel run around the block 3 times with garlic to clear the bad luck, which Kevin finds dumb, and Gretel tells him that it could be worse, where he could have gotten the power to talk to onions, and then Kevin agrees with her, saying that at least he isn't La Cebolla, singing her name like in the song, after which La Cebolla appears again singing, as if Kevin actually summoned her.
Oh, this is dumb.
It could be worse. You could have gotten the power to talk to onions.
You're right. At least I'm not La Cebolla. Uh-oh.
La Cebolla has invented the onion amplifier, which allows her to speak with every onion on the planet, which can only be done by draining powers from a superhero, just like in the infomercial, which it cuts to. I like the infomercial as a cutaway gag.
Can you talk to onions? Would you like to talk to more onions? Then use the Onion Amplifier. It works by simply draining the powers of any superhero. Take over the world. Impress your friends. Superhero not included.
This leads to a battle where La Cebolla calls the onions and scallions to attack Hamster, Gretel, and Kevin, captures Gretel by binding her with her onion ring of power, and incapacitates Hamster with onion breath. Kevin struggles to find a cure for bad onion breath, but then learns from Carolina that it can be cured by feeding Hamster ice water with apple slices and screaming a secret into the cup as she's trying to cure Dave's hiccups. Underground, La Cebolla has Gretel tied to the onion amplifier, and she summons every onion across the globe, where a bunch of onions roll out of an onion ring restaurant, and some out of the drive-thru of a fast food restaurant, which could be a slushy burger from Phineas and Ferb to my assumption. And inside, we have this gag where a man checks his burger and he sees onions on it, which he didn't want, and then the onions fly off it, which satisfies him.
Ugh, I said no onions. That's better.
And then the onions roll onto an airplane, a ship, and a car with some onions forming the driver. Then Kevin goes back outside with Hamster and the cure, which he feeds to Hamster in a desperate attempt to keep him alive. He tries to get Hamster to scream a secret into the cup, but Hamster has this hilarious fading/death moment.
Apples? Ice water? Come on, Hamster, I need you to rescue Gretel! Hamster, you need to scream a secret into the cup!
I'm a hamster. I don't have any secrets. You need to do it.
Me?
Yes, Kevin, quickly. I'm fading.
And that causes Kevin to scream the secret into the cup, where he shouts,
Sometimes I smell my socks after taking them off, and if they don't smell like soup, I wear them again!
And what happens? Hamster comes back to life, but he says that the water did the trick and there was no need to scream out that secret, and so he and Kevin go off to La Cebolla's lair, where another news report is shown. Veronica Hill is reporting about the global migration of the onions, baffling scientists, and her comments were pretty funny here.
Reports of vast migrations of onions are pouring in from all over the world, baffling scientists. Is this the work of some beautiful, misunderstood soul whose talent has been ignored too long? The answer, of course, is no. Only a loser would seek validation through such absurd methods. The better question is, what did I do to keep getting assigned these awful, awful field pieces?
This leads to La Cebolla calling the citizens ingrates in Spanish.
Told ya!
Ingratos! I'll show them all!
Just before Kevin and Hamster find the lair by digging a hole. Discovering that Kevin brought Hamster back to life, La Cebolla tries Plan B, where she reveals her grandmaster plan to have every onion in the world burst to drown the world in tears, and she summons the onions down to the lair. Gretel is shocked, Kevin is confused, wondering if the onions are still La Cebolla's friends, but she tells them that they're only her underlings, and the onions shake behind her. Kevin doesn't believe that she's ever asked the onions what they think of her plans, and La Cebolla says that the onions are stupid, brainless vegetables, overwhelming the onions, and Gretel questions if she actually means that, to which La Cebolla corrects herself, where the onions literally have no brains, and she believes she has to command the onions in order to get them to do what she wants for them. But when she attempts to command the onions to burst, the onions do nothing as they don't like what she said about them, and they retreat to whence they came, reversing themselves back to their original places, and even going back to that one man's hamburger which I laughed at. The hamburger gag would pretty much be my favorite moment from this episode.
I said no onions!
When La Cebolla realizes how badly she treated the onions, she breaks into tears, and Hamster, Gretel, and Kevin break into tears as well, which satisfies the villain, believing herself to be a great actress, but it's just the onion stink. Gretel defeats La Cebolla with the onion punch gag,
Onion punch!
and La Cebolla is promptly taken into police custody. Afterwards, Gretel states that all of that onion punching made her surprisingly hungry, and so she decides that she, Hamster, and Kevin go back home to finish dinner, though Kevin wonders what La Cebolla meant when she said that she received her powers from a light from the sky. But he and Gretel brush it off when the latter reminds him of how ridiculous her power was. The episode then ends with the aliens that gave Hamster and Gretel their powers lamenting the fact that their latest experiment was a failure. And that is it for La Ballad of La Cebolla.
Let's go.
Experiment 6228-108 complete. Result, failure. I'll say. So who came up with the idea of talking to onions as a superpower?
They can't all be winners.
Besides what I assumed was a slushy burger restaurant, I wasn't able to find any actual cultural or in-universe references in here, and there also aren't any other fun facts that I can cover, so I might as well jump to the characters. I just love La Cebolla as a villain, since her power is unique, and her personality of being so dramatic is incredible, and I have her voice actress Karina Lavaz to thank for that. She's a Peruvian-Venezuelan singer, songwriter, and actress, and I love her performance here. However, she's listed in the credits by her full name, Karina Moreno. And Gretel and Kevin have some of the best chemistry as siblings in this episode, right up there with Recipe for Disaster from episode 2. They have a lot of hilarious moments together, along with Hamster. Regarding the animation of this episode, it was done partly by Synergy and partly by Snipple, and for this segment, it's mostly pretty solid. While there are some parts where the line art is thicker and a bit cheaper than Phineas or Milo, it can get thin at other times, and I do like the lighting and the shading on the characters and objects, as well as the backgrounds, which I forgot to mention for the last segment. I noticed that sometimes the backgrounds even pay homage to comic book art. The character animation is mostly decent too, although there are some parts where they move like they were animated in Adobe Flash, which is on Snipple's part, but they have done their best with the materials they were offered. The rest of the animation is very solid thanks to Synergy's part, where their movements have some good execution, and the expressions are top-notch. Even La Cebolla's character design, despite looking somewhat like the typical background character from Milo Murphy's Law, looks pretty good with her hair, her lips, her onion suit and all. However, there is one part where if you pause for a second and you go a few frames, as Gretel is pretending to talk to a banana, when Kevin turns his head just flips toward Gretel rather than completely rotating, and that felt kinda off to me. It's kind of like seeing Phineas turn his Dorito head, but instead it flips instead of facing directly at the audience for a millisecond. But for the effects, they do look really good, such as Gretel's super speed when she and Kevin are running with the garlic, and the motion blurs when the scallions are hitting Hamster and Gretel. Plus, the way they move the onions as La Cebolla summons them is also very neat, with the rotations as they roll around, fly out the windows, and shake themselves. And lastly, I always mention the creative style of the words as Gretel announces her attacks, which also pays homage to superhero comic books. So my final thoughts are that, just like before, this is a really nice, really fun episode. And so, to end things off, I am going to be giving this episode a roller coaster rating. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10 roller coasters, how many am I going to give this episode of Hamster and Gretel? I'm going to give Cheer Cheer Bang Bang 9 roller coasters out of 10, and then I'll give La Ballad of La Cebolla 9 out of 10 as well. And that leaves this whole episode with a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 roller coasters. The animation isn't perfect, but I love everything else about these segments, and I'd watch this one again sometime. But now, let's bring it on home and get to our Twitter poll results from actually 1 month ago. Let's bring back our reporter to read it all. Take it away. Hello, listeners. 1 month has passed and your reporter, that's me, is back. And now it's time for the results of the last Twitter poll. We asked our listeners, if Phineas and Ferb built you the ultimate treehouse, how would you have fun in it? Hashtag Phineas and Ferb. Hashtag Danville Discussion poll. The choices were A. Go through the 2 bridge. B. Hang out in the lounge. C. Relax in the jacuzzi. Or D. Treehouse fight. Nobody answered that they would hang out in the lounge. But with 20%, listeners said they would have a treehouse fight. However, with 40% in a tie, listeners would either go through the 2 bridge or relax in the jacuzzi. As for me, I'll probably be the only person hanging out in the lounge, sitting there all alone in the lounge. Unless someone comes around to join me, that is. There were only 5 votes in total. But now, let's bring it back to Caleb for his pick and a brand new poll after 1 month of hiatus. This is the reporter signing out. Thanks, reporter, and long time no see. But what's my pick? How would I have fun in Phineas and Ferb's Ultimate Treehouse? I think I would relax in the jacuzzi because, for right now, I just feel like relaxing rather than getting hit by water balloons, and I could imagine I'm taking a vacation, especially considering how cold and snowy it is in my area. But now let's go on to a new poll, and it's gonna be another Hamster and Gretel related question, and this week it is... Which of the following is your favorite song from hashtag Hamster and Gretel? Hashtag Danville Discussion poll. And for this one, I'm going to use the songs I've heard in the show so far, but I'm only going to be using the songs that were done by the characters, so I'm not counting stuff like Race Against Time or Fighting Facial Hair. And there have been 4 songs of that kind from what I've reviewed right now, so the choices I've selected are A. Overload the Grid, sung by Kevin and the Duck Boys in Empower Failure. B. Ropa Vieja, sung by Gretel and Kevin in Recipe for Disaster. C. Don't Steal from the Bank, sung by Fred and the Plumbers Cheer Squad in Cheer Cheer Bang Bang. D. La Cebolla, sung by La Cebolla in La Ballad of La Cebolla. So, which of those songs is your favorite? Go ahead and head over to Twitter and find my alternate page at Caleb the PNF Guy, or search hashtag Danville Discussion poll to make your voice heard, and I'll see who wins. But anyways, that is all I'm gonna do for this week. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Danville Discussion. As for me, you can find me on my Facebook page at Real Caleb Dirksen, on my Twitter, Tumblr, and TikTok pages at Caleb Dirksen2, that's the number 2, on my alternate Twitter page at Caleb the PNF Guy, on my Instagram pages at Caleb.Dirksen for my main page or at Caleb Flynn Fletcher for my alternate page, and on my DeviantArt page at Caleb Dirksen20. You can also find me on Discord. Just type the username Caleb Dirksen, which is 2 words, and then the code number 4600. And if you go to the invite link in the description below, it'll also invite you to join my Discord server, so that you can talk with me about anything, including this podcast or my other content. You can also find me on YouTube. All you have to do is just search for Caleb Dirksen and look for the icon of me as a soldier. And if you want to support my work and get some awesome rewards all at once, which even includes getting access to my content before anyone else, such as my videos, my podcast episodes, or whatever, then you can become a patron at patreon.com/Caleb Dirksen. I definitely appreciate your support over there. As for this podcast, we are available to listen on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and you can also listen to us on Anchor by using your Apple or Android device or going on the web at anchor.fm/Caleb-Dirksen. It'll take you directly to the Danville Discussion page. If you guys listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast browser, can you just go and rate and review the podcast? That would be really great, but please be respectful and don't be a cyberbully. But if you were listening to this episode as a video on YouTube, then please press that like button and leave us a little comment with your thoughts on this episode of Hamster and Gretel. You can also share your feedback or ask some questions by sending us an email at danvillediscussion@gmail.com with the series and episode title in the subject line. Tune in next time for the latest episode of the Danville Discussion and all things related to Phineas and Ferb and beyond. And on that note, thank you again for listening, have a good rest of your day, and until next time, this is Caleb, over and out. This podcast was created strictly and only for entertainment and information purposes. It is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company, Disney Television Animation, or their affiliates. All and any names, images, clips, sounds, or other items related to Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, Hamster and Gretel, and other Disney properties are trademarks and or copyrights of their respective holders. All original content from this podcast is the intellectual property of the Danville Discussion and the host or hosts running the podcast unless otherwise noted.
The woman talked to onions.
Good point. Let's go home.
A bunch of Danville Discussion news to be talked about in a bonus episode after this.